When we talk about leadership, we always talk about on the other lens, right? What leaders need to do for people. Sometimes we hardly talk about what as a leader I need to do for myself.
Leaders first need to understand and have clarity on who they are, what their values are, why they have taken a leadership role in the first place, what are their expectations of themselves. So that kind of clarity is extremely important. You need to be on all the time pretty much as a leader. But that doesn't mean you give up on sleep. You need that. You need your nutrition. So you really need to take care of your body because that is the holding container for all the work that you do.
So how can leaders effectively integrate like different goals they have to manage?
Now, if you take something like Nike, right? Every sneakers is probably made in the same sweatshop in one of the countries. But why does a brand like a Nike command a certain respect and love from consumers? It is because of the philosophy that it stands for.
You both actually interviewed a lot of leaders, 100+ leaders. I'm curious to know, were there any misconceptions or common misconceptions between those about nurturing and leadership that you encountered? Hello friends, welcome back to our monthly podcast. This is your host Rohit. Today I'm interviewing two authors who have co-authored a book called The Nurturing Quotient, NQ. We'll find out what is NQ and how today's leaders can improve themselves by using this nurturing quotient and nurturing leadership. But before we go, I would like to thank Abhyuday Global Coach Circle for their continuous support. Like I say every time, if you are looking to get into professional coaching, please do check out their upcoming programs. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do so. Every subscribe, every like, and every comment is valuable. And if you want to hear from more leaders in the future, please let me know. Without further ado, let's speak to our authors, Rajesh and Nirupama. Hello Rajesh, hello Nirupama, welcome to the show.
Hi Rohit, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you both?
All good, thank you. And thanks for having us on the show.
No, it's my pleasure, both of you. So Rajesh and Nirupama, before we start, I'll always ask my guests, right? What's going on in your life? So I can start with you, Nirupama, first. What's going on?
I think very excited about our book, The Nurturing Quotient. So just getting prepared for the launch, for taking it to the world. I think that is really what is keeping us occupied. Apart from that, the work that we do, we just had International Yoga Day yesterday, and I think that was also a very good experience for us to connect with us very much in terms of living what we speak about in the book. So those are some of the things that are going on.
Brilliant. That's a great, life story going on in the moment for you. And Rajesh, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been exciting times the last few months. I had my photography exhibition, which I'd been working on for many years now. Nice. So I had a mixed media exhibition exploring the number 7 in April. And then May, I got my PCC certification again, something that I've been working on for a while. So that came through. And then, of course, June, the launch of the book, The Nurturing Quotient. So, yeah, quite a few interesting things happening and some more to look forward to.
No, brilliant. There's something in common, Rajesh. I'm a wedding photographer as well, right? When you just mentioned, the photography and leadership is quite cool. I heard a lot of photographers. I found a lot of photographers as coaches as well. So it's brilliant to be part of that.
Yes, absolutely.
Good, thank you. So Rajesh and Nirupa, you both mentioned regarding your book, right? I think the topic of our podcast episode today is about the Nurturing Quotient. To start, could you tell us what inspired you to write that book and why you felt that this concept especially was so crucial for today's leader? I'll start with you, Nirupama.
Thank you, Rohit. So, I've been a leadership development consultant, a coach, and a facilitator for last 25 years. So actually, I run workshops, worked with, close to 35,000 people across 60 organizations. And over the last few years, I started hearing this recurring theme of how stressed people are, how much of a struggle it is, how they have to balance multiple things. The concept of work-life balance has changed completely. Now there's work-life integration. So on one hand, people seem to be busier than ever. On the other hand, there's a strong longing for space, time. A lot of people at crossroads wanting to leave their jobs, others wondering What are we really doing? So I kept hearing these narratives, and that's what led, us, Rajesh and I, to have conversations around this topic. I also do a lot of work in the diversity and inclusion space. So, a lot of work with women leaders, a lot of work in making organizations more inclusive, creating a space of belonging. And again, I kept hearing the same theme of how do we really build workspaces where people feel nurtured, people feel cared for, not just some people, but all the people who are at the workplace. They really want to feel connection. They really want to feel some kind of belonging with the space, that somebody's really interested in them. A lot of issues around mental health kept coming up, especially in the post-COVID era. So these were some of the things that really led to the start of the idea for the Nurturing Quotient. And also, since I do a lot of work with women, and in my previous book, I created a model called, the 6 Feminine Powers. And I take this to a lot of women leaders. And there was a very interesting concept that, women are seen as nurturers, but they are not really in positions of power as leaders. So that was another thread that led to the exploration of this concept of nurturing and how critical it is for leaders.
Nice. That's a great inspiration, what I've heard from you. So Rajesh, what about you? Actually, what made you co-author with Nirupama as well? So that's my another curious question.
Yeah. And it's been an interesting experience. So I think just to add to what Nirupama was saying, I think on one level, just our experience, showed us that there is a lot going on. And I think, if you look at it, what's happening around the world, there are quite a few challenges that are there, right? Macroeconomic challenges, business challenges, people challenges, and actually personal challenges as well. Now, all these challenges actually take a toll on the leaders and suck out energy from them. And one of the things we realize is that it's very important for us to periodically put back energy into ourselves, right? And, luckily for us, both of us are big believers of that. Like I mentioned, photography is a passion. Yoga is another passion. So all of these things actually put energy back into us, right? So we try to nurture ourselves in different ways, even in our day-to-day life as well. So we said, why not, make that a little bit more mindful, a little bit more structured. And that's how the Nurturing Quotient was born.
Amazing. I was thinking, I know I haven't read the book yet, but I mentioned you shared a synopsis with us over LinkedIn as well, I think. So, reading that, you mentioned a significant shift, what leadership actually means, especially after, post-pandemic, all the challenges we are having daily. You can see the wars and other bits happening, a lot of things in the world at the moment going on, and especially pandemic. So how do you see the pandemic having redefined our notion of work and the qualities of a leader? So I'll start with you, Rajesh.
Yeah. When the pandemic was going on, I was the managing director for Perfetti, right? And, in India, Perfetti is a pretty big company. We have brands like Alpenliebe, Mentos, Chupa Chups, and so on. And we have 1,600 employees. So, nobody knew what was to be done when the COVID happened for the first time. Yeah. And a lot of it was about first understanding people, where they were, how the families were, and taking care of the basic requirements in terms of medical help and so on and so forth. Then came the emotional bit of managing, people were managing their homes, their children, their parents, and still had to focus on work. So I think qualities like compassion, authenticity, vulnerability, those came to the fore. And leaders need to sort of demonstrate that on a daily basis so that they could connect with the employees and walk them through the journey of, uncharted territory, so to speak. So that was one aspect of it. I think the other aspect was around how do we even work from home? There are 4 people working at home, kids having school from home. So how do you, this whole concept of workplace and personal space was getting sort of mixed up, right? So how do we sort of manage through that? So that was another second big kind of a challenge. The third was work-life balance versus work-life integration. Again, so these were a few of the things that as a leader I grappled with, and I know that my, other friends in other industries who were, leaders in their own right were also grappling with. And I think COVID sort of accelerated this whole need for something like nurturing leadership and a nurturing quotient.
I wanna ask you both. Actually, start with Nirupama, right? Why nurturing quotient?
Yeah, I think because that is the need of the hour. So as I was saying, we felt that leaders as nurturers had not received the kind of attention that it needed in all these years. The typical leader was a command and control kind of a leader who gave orders, who drove the people. In fact, the workaholic CEO who devotes himself, it's usually a him, to work was seen as a very common archetype of a typical corporate leader. But again, pandemic was one aspect. But I also saw, since I've been working with leaders over the last 25 years, there is a shift in what people want from leaders. What the younger generation, we call them the millennials or Gen Zs, what they expect from leaders, just as what children expect from their parents has changed significantly over the years. So the ask of the leaders has also changed. So, which is why we felt that old model of a leader as a know-it-all, Superman, Superwoman, who provides all the answers is really not tenable anymore. Leaders themselves don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, therefore, what is really needed is this aspect of firstly taking care of yourself, because the environment demands a lot from leaders. Secondly, the realization that you don't have to be the Superman or Superwoman. You can disseminate power to the others. You can really use the team to support you as well. And to do that, you need to nurture them. So, firstly, take care of yourself. Second, don't do it alone. You don't have all the answers. So, nurture people around you who can support you. So, the analogy we use is really, how you take care of a plant or a child. You need to grow them to their full potential. And that's why nurturing is the word we chose, because nurturing is typically used for plants, children, something that requires growth. And today the key word is growth, really. Yeah. And growth cannot happen without somebody to nurture that. And that's why we chose the concept of nurturing leadership. And the nurturing quotient is a measure of your ability to nurture yourself and others consistently. So we feel that, first there was a generation of IQ. Intellectual acumen is really important. Then EQ still continues to be important. But when you put the two together, you really need what we call NQ, the nurturing quotient. And the two lenses to that, I think, become very, very important. Managing your own self and energies, and how do you nurture others. In fact, in all the leadership journeys that I've worked on, we always start with leading self and then go on to leading others. And the common quality is that of nurturing. I think that's why I think that word had a lot of energy and meaning for us. And we chose the title Nurturing Quotient.
Yeah. You know how I connected with it? Like we say in our mythology, like Hindu mythology, like Shiva and Shakti together, right? You need that Shiva and then you need that Shakti together as well. And Shakti sometimes not always about that warrior, but it's all about nurturing as well. Yes. Isn't it? You need both, masculine and feminine energy to make people grow. Isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And another interesting thing I heard you mentioned regarding, usually him, right? So CEOs usually him. So this is why we're trying to change the narrative, So it doesn't matter who he or she is. They need to be nurturing. The NQ should be good so that they can become a better leader. Isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, there was, I use this in leadership, there was some research I came across which said that there is a 70% overlap between the words used to describe a man and a leader. There's only a 30% overlap between the words used to describe a woman and a leader. One of those words was nurturing. So this was quite a few years ago, that it was not even seen as a very core characteristic of leaders. But I believe that is the kind of leadership you want. You can be strong and kind. You can be decisive and caring. So that's really the model of leadership that I've seen works today.
And again, sorry, I'm going to stay with Nirupama for now, Rajesh. Sorry about that, but because we're talking about that nurturing. So Nirupama, you mentioned, in the book, you guys mentioned a study by consultancy, and which they require some critical traits for leaders. And can you elaborate on those? Why those qualities are so vital now?
Yes, I think the study we refer to, and there are lots of studies. There's a McKinsey study which says awareness and vulnerability and compassion, authenticity, all are critical. In fact, in our book, we call these qualities with the acronym of HOPE, HOPE. which is humility, openness, patience, and empathy, which is what you need to be a nurturing leader. And of course, this has elements of compassion, this has elements of authenticity. But we believe that it's very important for a leader to be humble because you don't have all the answers. Probably the new kid who's joined knows more about AI than you can ever, hope to do. Then you have to be open to new ideas, to be changing on the fly. What worked yesterday is not going to work tomorrow, open to giving and receiving. And the third quality, I think, is an underestimated quality for leaders, which is patience, right? Which plants, children require time to grow. You can't inject them with steroids and say produce results overnight. So when you're coaching, and Rajesh and I both are coaches, we've seen you don't get transformational results after one conversation. You need some patience to nurture. And of course, empathy is a common quality that everybody's spoken about, that you need to understand where the other person's coming from, what their world looks like, and really try and connect to the person at that level. So we've seen that these are the 4 qualities which are critical to be a nurturing leader, and of course, for leadership today.
Okay. And then now I'm going to come to you, Rajesh. How do leaders then balance those opposing imperatives we have at the moment, and then manage the situations like Nirupama mentioned, that don't exist or didn't exist before? We don't know what's coming up in the future. So how do you think that the leaders can balance?
Yeah, I think the world is moving to an and world today, right? So, for example, you as a leader, I do need to drive the business agenda and I need to drive the people agenda. So I can't do one and not do the other, right? So, for example, the word tough love today exists because, I need to be tough in taking decisions and moving things forward. Yet I need to have the compassion and the vulnerability to show that love to my team, and so that I can take them along as well. So I think the need of the hour today is how can we operate in an and environment. And again, here we've talked about 3 dimensions of it in our book. One is around having a self-orientation and others orientation. How do I invest time on myself, spend some time on myself to take care of me, yet make sure that I keep aside time to take care of my team and other people in the ecosystem as well. Or the second one is around having the discipline and the flexibility, right? So I need to be disciplined. So for example, me personally, I'm very disciplined about my fitness, right? I make sure that I get in my physical activity every single day. But I need to be flexible to say, if I have a travel plan, maybe I can't do my yoga, but I pack my running shoes with me so that I can go for a walk or a run, whichever city I'm visiting, right? So that's also important. And the third one, all leaders are ambitious. So how do I balance ambition with compassion, right? Again, here it is all about saying, yes, we have a business to run, we have profits to deliver, growth to deliver. But while we are doing that, can we also show compassion? And compassion is not only about showing compassion to others, but can we show self-compassion? We have to be kind to ourselves. We might make all the plans in the world and something might happen which doesn't allow us to achieve those plans. That doesn't mean that we have to be very harsh on ourselves. We need to have a plan B, a plan C, and so on. But we also need to make sure that, we are being kind to ourselves and taking care of ourselves. I think these are some of the ands that leaders need to work with if we really want to sort of grow both the business and the people.
Yeah. And again, I think what's coming up for me is that, we always, when we talk about leadership, we always talk about on the other lens, right? What leaders need to do for people. Sometimes we hardly talk about what, as a leader, I need to do for myself. Like you mentioned regarding compassion, if I am not compassionate with myself, how can I be compassionate with others?
Yeah.
So as a leader, I need to be compassionate with myself first before I even think about doing others, So what are your thoughts on that, Rajesh?
Yeah.
Oh, Nirupama, go on. Yeah.
Good. I think that's the first tenet of our book, right? Which is you can't serve from an empty vessel. And leaders first need to understand and have clarity on who they are, what their values are, why they have taken a leadership role in the first place, what are their expectations of themselves. So that kind of clarity is extremely important. And in our book, we look at it at 4 domains: the physical, mental, emotional, and the spiritual aspects. It's how do you nourish your body? Because you need energy. You need to be on all the time pretty much as a leader. But that doesn't mean you give up on sleep. You need that. You need your nutrition. So you really need to take care of your body, because that is, the holding container for all the work that you do. You need to take care of your mental well-being, which is, we call it, how do you have focus? How do you make time for learning? How do you have intellectual stimulation? How do you nourish and, open your heart? How do you connect with people? Have a passion outside of work, becoming more emotionally aware and intelligent. And then the spiritual aspect of it is nothing to do with religion. Really, how do you find purpose? You have a sense of contribution. How do you deeply self-reflect? How do you lead with that kind of authenticity? So if you continue to do that, then you can take your leadership to the next level. And very often leaders do neglect that aspect of focusing on the self.
Yeah, they do. And in the synopsis you mentioned regarding the old ways don't work anymore. And leadership is no longer just about displaying certain skills, and then we know the world is very complex. World is, you can only do the next right thing. It's really difficult with a lot of information available as well. But what are some of the old ways that you think are becoming obsolete?
Yeah, as I said, we started off with the leadership, leaders' power coming from a place of position. Which is in the old days, just because you held the position of CEO, VP, MD, people were expected to look up to you, respect you. That is no longer the case. Firstly, there's a study which shows the average CEO tenure is just for about 4 years, 4.5 years. So, you can't rely on your position alone to get things done. Secondly, expertise. Leader is the one who has all the answers coming from years of experience. That is no longer true. You have leaders who are, startup founders in their 20s, or you have leaders who are very, very experienced but are completely clueless when it comes to a particular technology. So leadership from position, leadership from expertise, which are the old ways, don't really, hold any kind of credibility or weightage these days. So leadership is really now about what we call the personhood, right? Who you really are, what you do for others, leading from a place of purpose. That is what is needed, and that's what people around you expect and look up to as well.
No, it's just a great way to think about it. Now I'm thinking, Rajesh, which Nirupama mentioned as well regarding profits. We always, leaders will think about productivity, and you mentioned about as well, like in the synopsis about profits. So how can leaders effectively integrate like different goals they have to manage?
Yeah. And again, if you look back at it, earlier brands used to work on pure functionality, right? And slowly it's moved to a place where the brand needs to have a larger purpose. Now, if you take something like Nike, right? Every sneakers is probably made in the same sweatshop in one of the countries. But why does a brand like a Nike command a certain respect and love from consumers? It is because of the philosophy that it stands for, right? So one of the things that we are seeing is that, how do leaders nurture their brands so that they can give it a larger purpose, which will then resonate with what the consumers are looking for. So I think that's one aspect of it. The other is, today there is a lot of interest and focus on CSR, and many companies do it as a tick mark. But if a company genuinely cared about the environment, the water consumption, the plastic that they put out, there are many ways in which you can actually integrate these issues into your business plan and business model as well, so that you're showing people and your employees and the external people that you truly care about nurturing the environment and taking care of it as well, right? So actually there are many ways in which this could be integrated into the day-to-day work that we do, so that we are truly nurturing the business, the teams, and ourselves.
I'm quite liking the term now, nurturing quotient. So well done on thinking about this, with the name. Yeah. And as we know, like traditional view of leadership is often associated with setting tough goals. Okay, here's the goal, meeting these targets. We need to be productive. We need to be in, always like profit. Obviously, every organization needs to be in profit, and otherwise it'd be really hard to sustain an organization and beating the competition. So how does you think this change, this nurturing leadership, will reconcile this drive for results, we are thinking about with more caring approach? How do you think that, Rajesh?
Yeah, I think, the fundamental shift we are talking about is to move from point A to point B. You can go in many, many different ways, right? We are talking about a way which can be effective and efficient, which is you set an agenda, you take a bunch of people along with you towards that goal that we want to achieve. Nurturing leadership comes into that place where we are able to then take a bunch of people towards a commonly aligned goal in a manner which grows them and grows the business as well. So I think it's not very dramatically different in terms of what we want to achieve, but it's just probably a more, say, efficient and a better way of doing it, which is more sustainable in the long run.
And Nirupama, you mentioned earlier as well, you can't serve from an empty vessel. That's your powerful statement, right? With Nurturing Leadership Framework. And you mentioned regarding one's body, mind, heart, and soul entails for a leader. Can we talk about these two a little bit more in detail, please? So, Nirupama, I'll start with you. Would you like mentioning regarding body and mind?
Yes. So, and of course, as I said, the body is the physical container. We've seen, interestingly, when we interviewed about 115 leaders, all of them are very intentional and conscious about a body practice, right? From going for runs, exercising, yoga, trekking. Almost all the leaders mentioned that their body practice gave them a lot of energy. And apart from that, eating right. Because sometimes leaders have harrowing schedules, they are traveling, they're taking these red-eye flights. But if we don't take care of what we put in, what we put out into the world will not be healthy. Hydration and sleep. There's a whole lot of research on sleep right now as being very critical. In fact, we came across a very interesting interview or podcast where some startup founders said that, in my early days, not sleeping used to be a source of pride, that we'd pull in these all-nighters, we would burn the midnight oil. But as we grew into mature leaders, I realized that is no longer tenable. Even the, likes of Bill Gates and Elon Musk have actually shared that as we grew into becoming the leaders, we realized saying I slept for 3 hours is not a badge of pride. So we do need to take care of ourselves, because every day we are giving out so much of energy. The chaotic world around, the people around us are all taking energy from us. So if we don't take care of the body, that is not going to be sustainable or tenable. And, it's very sad to hear of, many CEOs having heart attacks when they are 40 or having stress-related illnesses. It's really not sustainable if you don't take care of the body. The second is the mind. When we say mind, of course, we mean really the quality of focus, the quality of attention and mindfulness. So leaders need to, practice mindfulness, practice heightened focus, because you have to take critical decisions. You can't afford to be distracted. You have to be very mindful about where your time and mental energy goes. And then you need to keep replenishing that. For example, we suggest practices like reading, listening to podcasts, learning something new all the time, keeping the mind really, fresh. So one leader mentioned she does crossword, somebody else does Sudoku. These are little things, but it's really about keeping the mind sharp. And the third aspect is intellectual engagement. Right? It's not only about poring over your books, but expanding your horizon. Do you attend seminars? Do you go for those courses? Do you give yourself scope to meet with different kinds of people, engage with them, learning from others? So continuous learning with heightened focus and practicing mindfulness is really what we mean by the mental domain. Maybe Rajesh can talk about.
Yeah. So we're coming to Rajesh, talk about other two. So what are the other two, Rajesh?
Yeah. I think the third one is around, opening your heart. And again, this has a couple of dimensions to it. One is connecting with people, right? Again, I draw energy from connecting with people. And for me, people are a huge source of energy. I love walking around in the office when I was working, or here I make it a point to catch up with somebody for a coffee every day. So, are we able to connect with people? We are all, social beings after all. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, do we have a passion, right? So for me, photography is a passion. When I'm shooting, and as I'm sure is the case with you, you're not thinking about anything else. And when you come back from a shoot, you are on a complete high. So whether it is music or photography or playing a sport, very important to have a passion which can actually give you a lot of positive energy. And the third part of the heart is really around having a positive outlook and a positive mindset, right? That itself can also lift us up, lift our spirits up, and lift the spirit of people around us as well. So these are three dimensions of the heart energy. And the fourth one was what we call the spirit, which is really about enriching the soul. like Nirupama said, it's not really about a religious point of it, but the different dimensions to it are around, one, are we contributing to the community in some way, right? So, for example, as a family, we run something called My Daughter is Precious, where we support the graduation education of girl children, and we've so far supported about 85 girls through their graduation education. Gives us a lot of satisfaction, and of course, it's helpful to somebody, right? So that's one aspect of it. The second is, am I living by a purpose? Do I have a purpose that I sort of live by on a daily basis? I wrote my own personal mission statement about 10 years ago, and I'm very happy to say that almost on a daily basis, I managed to sort of live by my purpose. And the third aspect of it is around, am I doing some self-reflection? Am I meditating? And am I getting my me time, which allows me to sort of go within a lot more? So I think these are, some dimensions of the spiritual energy, what we call. So if you're able to manage all these 4 domains of energy in a very mindful and meaningful manner, actually that can nurture us in a much better way.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt. I want you to share a message. If you are enjoying this conversation and you are a leader looking to elevate your impact, you are not alone and you don't have to do it alone. I offer one-on-one coaching for founders, executives, and change makers who are ready to lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Whether you are navigating growth, change, or simply the next big leap, I'll help you unlock your full leadership potential. Visit ragba.com to learn more and book a free discovery call. Now, back to the episode. Interesting. So, mindful and meaningful manner. That's a great way to put it here, Rajesh. So I can feel it this way, right? So if my mind, heart, body, and soul together, and I'm nurturing myself, I haven't tried it because I'm pretty bad at that. But if I use that nurturing quotient, I'm gonna ask you actually, how do you define that? Actually, how you measure it? But if I do that, I'll be a better leader. I'll be able to make decisions probably more, how do you say, in a more empathetical way or more, easy way. Not easy in the sense, but more in the sense I'm comfortable with those, right? So inside me, I'm okay. So this is how I'm connecting with this at the moment. What do you think of that? Is it the right way to think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So when you need clarity, you need quick decision, you need to be energetic, you do need to give to the others. And if you're not aligned internally, if you're not getting the energy, if you're not making space for reflection, if you're not able to bring that laser sharp focus or connect with the people, the output that you will give as a leader is not going to be the most optimal one for you. It'll show up in decisions, right? It'll show up in your irritable moods. It'll end up you taking it out on the people around you. And some of the leaders were very candid at admitting that, because you're in the position of power, you take it up, right? And we've heard that people leave bad bosses, not poor organizations. So you don't want to be the boss from hell. And nobody sets out in the morning saying, I want to make other people's life miserable. But because there is some issue they have internally, right? Inability to voice their thoughts and feelings, not getting the nurturing that they need, they are not able to give it to others. So which is why we believe this piece is essential for you to bring your best self to work. And the ask of a leader is really high. So your benchmark for your best self is also pretty high, which is why this becomes really critical.
Yeah. And it's like you said, Nirupama here, right? I'll be able to make more responsive discussion rather than more reactive discussions. If my, mind, body, soul, and heart are joined together and nurtured properly. Yeah, it's interesting. So, and you, in the synopsis, you also mentioned about 4 qualities, right? And could one of you, or maybe Rajesh, you could share an example of a leader you have observed who embodies those qualities. But before that, can you share those qualities, please?
Yeah. I think Nirupama spoke about those qualities of
earlier.
Hope, humility, openness, patience, and empathy. Again, we interviewed over 115 CEOs, and I think what was interesting was different CEOs, show that and demonstrate that to different levels. So a few names that stand out for me. I think Suresh Narayanan, who's the Nestle chairman and managing director. I think he's an epitome of humility. I mean, he's a leader of a very large organization, but the way he comes across, the way he's so grounded and humble in terms of how he conducts himself was something that stood out for us. I think openness, which we defined as a sense of curiosity, was sort of symbolized by a lot of leaders having reverse mentors, right? So they have these young people to act as mentors for them so that they can learn how a 25-year-old is thinking. So I personally, for example, also have a mentor who's a student at Ashoka University, and I go to her to understand what goes on today in the mind of a 25-year-old. And that's, again, very interesting and important for me as a leader to be aware of those kind of things. When it comes to patience, I think a lot of leaders do demonstrate patience. One name that stood out for me was Ashish Dhawan, one of the founders of Ashoka University. I think what I liked about him is he's a large sense of purpose for where India can be. And a lot of work that he's doing is the results of it would be seen in 5 years, 10 years from now. So you need to really have a big vision and a lot of patience for it to sort of happen over a period of time. And again, like Nirupama said, empathy is one quality we found across many leaders, demonstrating it in different ways, whether it is taking care of a employee who's requiring assistance because of some caregiving, or a distributor who's in trouble because of some local issues in the market, and so on and so forth. But empathy is sort of foundational to nurturing leadership in many ways.
So you mentioned 150 leaders, 100 plus leaders you interviewed for this. Are they all based in India, or do you interview like Western leaders as well outside India?
Yeah. So
go ahead, Rajesh.
So we interviewed about 117 leaders, of which there were about 34 of them who were women leaders. So we also wanted to make sure that we got a good mix of gender and took on their perspective as well. That was very important.
Yes.
And we got about 10 leaders who are non-Indians. So an American, somebody from Greenland, a CEO, lady CEO from Belgium. So we got that also as part of the mix. And we also got a few Indian CEOs who are not based in India. So, Ram Raghavan, who's a big leader of Colgate, based out of New York, or Mohit Anand, who's based in Singapore, a couple of them based out of Dubai. So we did make sure that we build in the cultural nuances also into it.
Yeah.
We see that also plays a role in how leadership plays out with different leaders.
They do. This is why my head was that, right? Because sometimes if you focus on just India, you probably get a different view of that, right? So that's good to hear. And to demonstrate those qualities, we're talking about hope, right? You introduce some behaviors. So could you elaborate on those behaviors? I will start with you, Nirupama, this time. What are the behaviors you have, and then we can discuss those behaviors.
Yeah. So we came up with an acronym. We call it MILE, M-I-L-E. It stands for Mentoring and Coaching Behaviors. How do leaders really take on the role of a mentor and use a coaching style while having conversations with their team? Then I is inspiring. That also we have a set of behaviors. How do you inspire people to give their best? Then listening. One of the most underrated leadership skills, but every time I do a leadership workshop, the biggest aha comes when leaders realize they are not as good a listener as they thought they were. That is the L, listening, and it's a very, very powerful leadership skill. And then empowering. How do you create an environment of trust, psychological safety, so that people feel empowered to give their best? How do you build that world-class team by empowering others? So these are the 4 behaviors. And then we have, of course, distilled best practices for each one of these to see how it can be implemented on a consistent basis and actually be made into leadership habits that all leaders can display. So, of course, you need the qualities of hope, but how do these qualities get demonstrated? And what do people observe? It's the behaviors. And therefore, to be effective in these 4 behaviors, you need the 4 qualities. But this is how it translates into action at the workplace.
Okay. So could you define those actions, please? So let's start with, for example, listening and empowering, Nirupama. What are those actions you think? Yeah.
So for listening first, I think what we also said is it's very important to create the mindset to listen, the time to listen, and the space to listen. So when we say listening mindset, it's very interesting, and I've seen in coaching, A lot of leaders believe that listening is an act of weakness. It takes time, or I have to be decisive as a leader. So, what's the point of listening to others in the first place? So, really need to start with a listening mindset that it is a valuable leadership skill, and it builds engagement, involvement. And when I listen to people, they feel heard, they feel visible. And when people are heard and seen, they give their best. Right? So this is really the sunshine and the water that you give a plant to grow, is truly, truly listen to them, listen with empathy, listen with care, listen with complete mindfulness and avoiding distractions. And if you are able to do that, people feel automatically nurtured, right? So, if with a child also you find, or with a partner, they really want to be heard and understood. And if you do that, it can be hugely empowering and people feel very nurtured. And when they feel nurtured, they feel like giving their best. And very often, just the act of listening helps people to solve their own problems, right? As coaches, we are taught listening in the coaching certification. So it's a skill. And, as you listen to people, they feel resourced, they feel more capable, and they are able to come up with solutions. So, that is really what listening is all about, and removing some of these barriers and screens and the mindsets and the biases that prevent us from listening. So that's what we mean by listening, and those are some of the best practices, clearing that space. And then empowering is, as I said, about creating an environment of trust, building psychological safety, delegating effectively with people, flexing your style with people, knowing who needs what, like, which plant needs how much water, which plant needs shade, which plant needs sunshine. And then people feel empowered to give their best. And the other thing we found is language is very important. Using positive language, not using, abusive language or humiliating people. The old school leaders felt that, if I humiliate people, they will perform better. That is no longer true, right? If I call them names, that's the only way to get things done. Only instilling fear will make people perform their best. That is not true any longer. You have to give feedback, but you do it. There's with the framework. One of the frameworks we've used is radical candor. You might challenge directly, but you care personally, and you do give them feedback. So these are some ways of empowering